Welcome back, everyone. Over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Millie. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dam Migration. If I knew what I know now, ... What a great session, topic, and way to kick off this morning is session number 2. As a reminder, if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A panel here in the session. And with that said, I'm Craig Bollig with Orange Logic, the modern dam for institutions and organizations. We're delighted to have you join us on this session today about data migration, which is such an important part to any digital asset management project, be it you're consolidating systems and this is your first digital asset management platform, or like so many others, maybe you've outgrown your current dam and are looking to migrate to a new solution. One of those customers that we work with here at Orange Logic is University of California. And joining us this morning is a director of USC's digital library, Deborah Holmes-Wong, who actually began her work at USC as the project manager for the migration from their homegrown dam to their new commercial solution. And with that, Deborah, welcome to the floor.
Hi. As he said, I'm Deborah Holmes-Wong. I'm director of the digital library. I've been director of the digital library for approximately 7 years. And before that, I was doing a lot of IT project management within the libraries. I am a librarian by training, but I've moved into this role over the years. So I'm going to, some context, just some business disclaimer. The opinions here expressed are mine. They're not the opinions of my employer, and this is not meant as any endorsement of any current product or past product or anything like that. So please, it's just trying to share some information about what worked and what didn't for us. So this is if you want to see what our system looks like right now, this is the URL. It's the USC Digital Library at usc.edu. And so, so you can go there and you can see Cortex in action. Okay. Overview. So what I'm going to cover is I'm going to give you an overview, a background about the digital library and our migration so that you can appreciate the scope of the project. I'll go over where we had issues or where we could have done more planning to make the migration process smoother, and end with some problems we hadn't anticipated but that we're working through. So for context, the digital library is 25 years old. It began with a grant from, I believe, the NSF. It was initially focused on Los Angeles and had a lot of photographic and text collections. It now contains photos, videos, PDFs, RTIs, PTMs, and eventually some .obj files. So we've got a variety of different kinds of media that we've stored in here and made accessible. And so that is one of the challenges of having a digital asset management system or a digital library management system, is that we've got a variety of different kinds of media that we want to work with. Right now, we have approximately 500,000 metadata records. Some people would call those digital objects, which comprise 1.5 million files, 100 or so collections, and we have materials from 40 plus contributing institutions that we've partnered with on grant-funded projects over the decades to make their materials available through the USC libraries. Okay, so what's next? So one of the first issues that we encountered was the issue of jargon. And I think this is true with any migration that you have. If you move from a homegrown system to any system, or you're moving from one system to another, you're going to find that you're used to using one set of vocabularies and your new vendor is used to using another. And we've been using our previous system for 10 years. And we've actually gotten our communications people to ask us questions like, how many compound objects do you have? Which is basically very jargony for that other system. And I'm sure they'll ask us, in a few years, for how many digital assets do you have? So Orange Logic is a digital asset management system, and it's coming from the world of commercial content management. So the terms that they use are different than the terms we use because we're coming from the digital library world. Well, one of the things that would have made things a lot easier is a glossary. So we could just say, what are the equivalents? Like, oh, this is a digital object, compound object. They call it an asset. We call it a collection or a sub-collection. They call it a folder. We call it a book. They call it a folder. And you notice that there are times when they use one word and we've got a bunch of different terms. And then also there are times when we use one term like We use permissions because we're coming from the Unix, Linux background where you've got permissioning. And so we think of things as permissions, but they've got a variety of ways of setting what we call permissions, and they're permissions, purposes, restrictions, and security functions. And if you're working with Orange Logic, you know you've heard all of these terms. And if you have just signed a contract and you're beginning your migration, you're going to hear these, and there will be people on your team that will become very familiar with the differences between permissions, purposes, restrictions, and security functions. Okay, so basically, as you see, we've got some, one of the things I wanted to bring up is we do have a lot of things that have multiple files. And so having the folder available and being able to use folders in a variety of different ways as different document types has been something that's been very helpful as we've migrated our content. So what did our migration workflow look like initially? Well, one of the things that we had to deal with was the fact that our initial system that we were moving from had a very different file structure that didn't really resemble anything that a human being would want to interact with. It was basically, it would be the collection name, and then it would be volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and the volumes would not have any, you could have half of a book in one volume and the other half in another volume. So it was, so that's one of the things that we had to overcome. So we created this upload folder structure. And as one of the things that we were doing is that we were OCRing on ingest. We found that that was not a good idea. So we stopped OCRing on ingest. Then the next thing that we did was we would move the files that were uploaded with using APIs and scripts. We would move them from the home file, the upload file, to a new home file that would actually bear the name of the collection. So they were in an upload file, and then they would go to a home collection that had different features than it's a different content type than the upload file. And then we would have to do a manual publish. And a manual publish of 1.5 million files sounds really awful, and it isn't great, but there were some benefits, and I'm going to go over the benefits of doing the manual publish, because one of the things that we hadn't been able to do in our old system was see some of the problems with our files, because it wasn't easy. So one of the things that we were able to identify quickly by doing the manual publish is we could identify files that didn't load but made metadata that did, proxies that weren't created when they should have been, so we could rerun, proxies, or recreate our proxies. Corrupt files that were either corrupted on transit or corrupted in the legacy system. And the good news is that we only found 2 files that were corrupted on transfer. All of our other files were already corrupt in the legacy system, and they were, corrupt on the archival tapes. So that's bad in some sense, but it's good that the system, they weren't messed up in the transfer. And we had several hundred files that were bad from the legacy system. So, and then the other thing is that we had a metadata mix-up, but that also had happened in the legacy system. We went back to the legacy system, the metadata was mixed up in the legacy system. But when we were going through the, the manual publish, we could see that's not a picture of a lake, that's a person, and so we knew that there was something off. It happened because we load metadata with spreadsheets because we're usually doing batch loads, even when we're not doing migration. So what did the new workflow look like? One of the things that we do now is we create PDFs for multi-page items before we upload the multi-pages. We upload it all together so that we don't have to deal with some other issues that go on in the system that I'll talk about at the end. We still put them in the upload folders, but the upload folders that we've created, we don't call it upload now, we call it staging to make a difference between the migration and the new materials. We call it staging, but the file structure in staging matches the file structure of the way we want it to be when it goes to the home folder. And then the other thing that we do is we put the folders in the virtual folders before we load, if we're going to load a lot of things, because there's an upper limit on how many things you can just drag and drop in the system. And so if you've got more than a certain number, you have to use an API, and we really want to avoid using APIs. So if you set up your virtual folders first, put your folders in your virtual folders and then load your content, it's a much smoother process. You only have to load it into your folder and it'll already be there in your virtual folders. Yeah, so, and then we continue to use the scripts for metadata. We're doing more using the inherent reporting function that is in Cortex, where we can download basically a CSV, add information in the CSV and then upload it after we've uploaded the content into the system, and there's a record for it. And then publication, one of the things that we do is try to do bulk using API calls, bulk changes. So the biggest issue that we always have on any migration is metadata. We have a very detailed metadata schema. It's beautiful conceptually. Wayne has been thinking about this for probably his entire career. He's been doing this for close to 30 years now. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's qualified and modified Dublin core. In theory, you could do wonderful things with this schema, but we've never been able to make it work beautifully in any system we've used, whether it was home-built, commercial, or open source, because basically it's a conceptual model, and conceptual models are beautiful. And it's very much like, and so the reason is that we're going from XML and we're putting things into, CSVs and tabled structures. And so it's kind of like taking the ocean and sticking it in a bottle of water. You've got something that's beautiful and then you've got to contain it somehow. And so the digital asset management, regardless of what it's been, has been that bottle. Okay, so what are some of the issues that we've dealt with when we've been doing metadata? Well, like I said, we have this schema. It's a beautiful qualified Dublin core. One of the things that we did initially when we found out that they had paired values is we thought, wow, paired values, or Wayne thought, wow, paired values, at least I can get two of the things that I really love together, And so, so we shied away from the core fields. And even though sometimes the core fields could do what we needed, we kind of went with the paired values. And one of the things I would really think about would be really looking at this again, if we were to do this over again, and really look at what could go into the core fields rather than what would stay in our own USC named fields, because there's a lot of flexibility within the core fields themselves, even if they're not paired values. A lot of the core fields have what we needed, and a good example of that is one of the things that we found in previous systems was for location, you would have one location field and you would cram all of your metadata about location, city, state, address, all of that would go into one field. But but we didn't like that because we wanted to be able to create indexes for city, state, city, state, country, address, things like that. So we've used qualifiers within Dublin core for, we have a basic geographic location field, and then we use qualifiers. Now, when we really didn't look at this system that closely. We would have, if we had looked at it more closely, we would have found that in the core fields, we have city, state, country, and some other things that we could have used to make our migration easier, and also to make things like filtering and faceting easier for us. Cortex has been wonderful, and they've been building out some of the features around the paired values, but they're not all there yet. So this is something that I would really reconsider again is, do we really need the paired values for as many of the fields as we need? Another thing that we didn't really know at first, and we found this out because a user contacted us, was inherited metadata gets inherited from the high level folders all the way down to the lowest record if it's a core field. And if it's searchable at any level, it's searchable at all levels. So we had this problem because somebody came to us and said they were searching for nuns in the Congo. And they were, and this is a famous case within Cortex now because of the use case was nuns in the Congo. It also happens with our yearbook, El Rodeo. If the word appears in the high-level description and the word Congo appears in the high-level description for the particular collection, the International Mission Photography Archive, it ends up being found in all of the records when you do a search. And so we ended up with 600 records for nuns in the Congo, but nuns in the Congo together actually is really probably less than 30 records in the entire 1.5 million records in the digital library. So it's a lot smaller. So we found out that this was related to the metadata, the core fields. So core fields are good for metadata you want to inherit all the way down. They're not good if you don't want to inherit that metadata. So one of the things that we did to fix this is the Congo was in the description field. So we moved the information from the description field to a USC description field and made that not inheritable. Basically made it so that it wasn't inherited all the way down, and that fixed the problem. So the metadata was there and you could see it and read it and learn about the collection, but all of the records in that collection didn't have that metadata. So basically those are the two suggestions I have. You use core fields for metadata you want to inherit, and use your own fields for metadata that you want to keep at a high level and don't necessarily want to inherit. And then to think carefully about how you use your paired values if you're going to use paired values. Really look at the core fields and make sure that you can't, that there isn't a way of doing it with the core fields. Okay, then a couple, so I'm going to finish this real quickly. So there were some display issues, and this has to do with loading. Things get loaded and put into folders in sequential order in the order you load them. They weren't coming off of our system in that order. The cover page is the first item that's, the first item that's loaded for a folder. So we've fixed some of this, but one of the things that we've done with the things that are multi-page is we're loading PDFs and we're hiding the pages, which is the fastest way of dealing with this issue. Okay, and the other thing that we forgot to do, which highlighted the nuns in the Congo problem, was we forgot to reset the relevancy search when we went live. We had it set up differently because we were doing a lot of things on the back end, and so we set the default to something else, and we didn't set it back to relevancy when we had public users, and so they were getting, a lot of what looked like a lot of garbage. Which brings up thinking about public users. We didn't involve public users as much as we should have. They have different needs from our digital library team. Your public users are your super users. We understand complexity and they don't. And so in summary, here's some of the things that I would do differently. I would do a lot more housekeeping. I would really think about metadata. And I would make sure that we kept track of the things that we did to make our lives easier on migration that would really impact our users. And I would involve more users in the decision-making process around the interface earlier. Okay, and we have no time for questions. No, we have 2 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, just want to mention, so we are coming up on time for this session and wanted to invite everyone to feel free to get in touch with both Deborah and me via the booth here on Hublio, and also to connect during the Birds of a Feather networking session coming up after the following. So if there are any questions in the meantime, looking at the Q&A here, one of them is just really around the housekeeping, Deborah. So maybe that's a good piece to touch on is how do you maintain the clean metadata that you have and ongoing? What are your objectives there for maintenance of metadata?
So I think the idea is to, before you migrate it, you have it clean before you move it in, because it's always harder to clean things up afterwards. But though one of the things that we have found is the way that you do reporting. There's a feature where you can report out things in the CSV file. So that's one way where you can clean things up. One of the things that we know that's going to be an issue in terms of cleaning is our subject headings, because we've been taking subject headings from so many different contributors. They're kind of a mess. So one of the things that we will be looking at is what Orange Logic calls tags. So the tags will be something that we have to deal with, and we'll probably have to prioritize which ones we do first. But it is one of the issues is that we need to do more housekeeping before we migrate in, because it's really it's always easier to do it before, clean it up when you've got it in a nice spreadsheet or CSV or something where you can see, oh wow, this thing is spelled wrong and it's sorted in the wrong spot, so I need to fix it. Than it is to go in and do all of the cleanup. And then I think that anybody who's worked with spreadsheets can tell you the highlights of using Google spreadsheets versus Excel spreadsheets, and why you want to use one for one set of things and one for another set of things. But we won't get into that. That could be a whole session on, migration. Should I use a Google spreadsheet or should I use an Excel spreadsheet?
Oh, most certainly. Most certainly. Well, all right, time, everyone. Deborah, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, lessons learned. And of course, the recording will be available for all to view after today's sessions. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.